Let her rip.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. We have 4 guests and we're still really small today. I don't know where everybody is.
Oh, they're up there.
Oh, boy.
About 6 more times.
Well, they're gonna miss the last parts about heaven. When they get here, we'll be talking about hell. So on your sheets, Roman numeral 1, letter A. So we're talking about suffering, and this portion of the lesson is how the eternal perspective shapes the way we view suffering, knowing that there is a heaven to anticipate. So some of the scriptures we've looked at already are that the glory of heaven is so incomprehensible to us that by contrast, even the worst suffering we go through here is very small. So the more we understand what the scripture says about heaven, the smaller our suffering seems to be. Our present sufferings are not worth comparing to the glory that is to be revealed, Paul says in Romans 8. And then we started on A3, that there are degrees of felicity to be gained. So another aspect of heaven is to realize that heaven is not, we're not communists in heaven, but everybody doesn't have exactly the same. There's no sin, there are no tears, there's no pain, there's no suffering, but there are degrees of glory and different degrees of reward. So last week we looked at the parable of the minas, remember? Everybody's given one, and then somebody who was faithful and turned it into 10, his reward is 10 cities. Somebody that turned it into 5, his reward is 5 cities. So the degrees of reward are different, and that's what we're looking at now. So the second scripture there for that is 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Would you turn to that, please? 1 Corinthians 3, page 1212. Yeah, I think I'll start at verse 10. Paul writes, according to the grace of God given to me like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation and someone else is building upon it. Let each one take care how he builds upon it, for no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become manifest. For the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. And if anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. So do you see what he's saying there? Using this analogy of building a building on the foundation of Christ, what do you use to build upon that building? So it's not literal gold and precious stones, right? That would be a way of describing the best and most honorable and marvelous things that could be done for the work of Jesus Christ. Building on it with wood and hay and straw and stubble, that would be building on it with things that don't really last. So what if, Pastor Oswald, what if I was like the potluck king of Lutheranism? Man, I can arrange the best potlucks. And everybody loves the potlucks I arrange because I get all these different kinds of foods, and I make sure the jellos are all the right liturgical color. What does that do for the kingdom of Christ, right? That doesn't build. How does that build up the kingdom of Christ? Those will be works that may not last into eternity. What's it? By contrast, I hope a lot of it, I keep pushing this all the time because I think we should all get it, that Voice of the Martyrs magazine. So I don't know if you saw the last issue that came out. They just have such great stories in there. And the suffering that that fellow went through, to be tortured and put in prison again and again and again for the sake of Christ, and yet his faith was strong, and he used that as part of his witness to Christ. That's building with gold, right? That's the stuff when we all get to heaven, and Paul says here, everything's going to be made manifest. I think of it this way, right? We'll go up for judgment, and one at a time we'll all walk up there, and there's going to be a ginormous video screen, miles across, and they're going to show everything in our lives, only not everything that we did, but everything we thought, everything we said, everything will be made manifest. Now, if you're a Christian, guess what? All the sins got yeah, if you're a Christian, all the sins got edited by the master editor, right? They got taken out. But, okay, now you take out all the sins, some people's videos are going to be real short because they didn't do a whole lot for the kingdom. And there are other people, everyone's going to see what they did for the kingdom. Even they didn't get recognized here on earth, no one gave them an award, or they didn't have fancy names in the front of the program, but the Lord used them mightily. So you see there are different degrees of reward at the final judgment.
But on behalf of the church basement ladies, everything they do for Christ, it's in the kitchen or wherever.
Yes. Did I make it sound like I was putting down all the work?
I don't think you were.
Okay.
Just in case anybody-
No, those are the kinds of works, it's Pastor Oswald organized the potluck, right? But who did the dishes? That's who's gonna be the one that's, right?
Well, I just wanted to say whether our video is short or whether it is great, the response of Jesus will be the same. Well done, thou good and faithful servant.
Yes, but there's a but. That this is like an additional judgment, right? So there's a judgment between those who enter the kingdom and those who don't. And all those who enter will hear, well done, good and faithful servant. But there's this judgment seems to be a judgment strictly for believers. This is not the unbelievers here. And there's this second revelation of what they did. And so verse 15, if anyone's work is burnt up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. Meaning there are going to be people that get into heaven just barely. And the knowledge of that, how should that make us live our lives now? That should encourage us to live in light of that day of judgment. Let's look at Matthew 20 very quickly. Matthew 20.
10:48.
Very quickly going over to verse 23. This is the mother's request. Remember the mother of the sons of Zebedee, James and John, came and asked Jesus, hey, could someone sit on your right and on your left? And Jesus' response is, you don't know what you're asking. But there is behind that, look at verse 23. He said to them, you will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father. There is an acknowledgement that somebody's going to be at the right and the left of Jesus, which is a way of saying kind of his two top guys, right? So there are distinctions in heaven in terms of the levels of glory and the levels of reward that people will have. And I want to emphasize, like I said last week, we're not going to be coveting. I'm not going to look at someone else's mansion and go, oh, I should have that. Sin is past. There's no lording it over. Nobody's going to come and say, hey, look, I got a bigger reward than you did. Right? But But this idea of different degrees of glory in the final kingdom, that is biblical, and that should shape the way we think of things. Just go back in Matthew to chapter 19, verses 28 to 30. This is the passage I made reference to in my sermon. Did anyone hear that? I kept looking out. I'm preaching my sermon, and everybody was kind of like this. Was it really hot in there, or was I that boring? I don't know. What's iceberg? Verse 28. Jesus said to them, "Truly I say to you, in the new world, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel." So there's a special place reserved there for the apostles, right? In other words, it's not the same for everybody. Let me read you a little clip from The Weight of Glory by C.S. Lewis. Just a couple little portions here. The thrust of what he's about to tell us here is to realize that how you treat other people here on earth should be in light of the fact, or in view of the fact, that they are eternal persons. That what we are here on earth, here's the idea. We tend to think of heaven and hell as just like the same as earth, only one is hotter and one is higher. It's completely different, right? Whatever we are here, we keep on becoming into eternity. Have you ever known like a really mean, grumpy old lady that nobody likes? Ever met one of those?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They exist.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And were they born that way? No. They get worse over time. The older they get, the worse they get. Now just magnify that out 1 billion years. What do you think they'll be like? And the same is true for God's people, right? People that know the Lord and are trying to grow in sanctification and holiness. Sometimes we can barely stand each other, but the Lord's at work in us. Now magnify that out 1 billion years. Just think what you will be someday. That's kind of the background of what he's saying. So he writes this: "Nature is mortal, we shall outlive her. When all the suns and nebulae have passed away, each one of you will still be alive." It may be possible for each one to think too much of his own potential glory in the hereafter, but it is hardly possible for him to think too often or too deeply about that of his neighbor. The load or weight or burden of my neighbor's glory should be laid on my back, a load so heavy that only humility can carry it, and the backs of the proud will be broken. It is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest and most uninteresting person you can talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship. Or else a horror and a corruption, such as if you now meet it, if at all, it is only in a nightmare. All day long we are in some degree helping each other to one or the other of those destinations. So you see how thinking about heaven and hell should change the way we think about each other and treat each other. So that's important to suffer. And I want to show the other side of it too. So there's letter A, Roman numeral 1, letter A, there's a heaven to anticipate. Letter B, there is a hell to be rejected. So thinking about the reality of eternal torment also shapes the way we look at our lives here. Let's go to the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5. Matthew 5. Matthew 5, verses 29 and 30. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go to hell. All right, now, if we all gouged out our eyes when they caused us to sin, we would all be sitting here blind, every one of us, with no hands, right? So he's not saying literally gouge your eye out, but it's a form of hyperbole, right? He's saying the steps you should take to protect your sense of holiness and to guard yourself from sin should be as extreme as if you would gouge your eyes out. That's how serious you should take it. Why? Because it's better to go to heaven without your eye than to have your whole body cast into hell. Now, are there going to be any people in heaven with one eye or one hand? No, of course not. So it's not a literal description there. It's trying to show us how much more. So what's the Latin word for that? Everything important has a Latin phrase for it. I can't remember what it is now. I don't remember. But how much more then should we take those steps here on this earth to keep ourselves from sin when we think of it in light of what heaven or hell could be like, right? I wrote here, this is an important sentence. Much of what Jesus says is incomprehensible without this perspective. So Jesus just doesn't make sense to us unless we realize that this idea that there is a real heaven and a real hell should be shaping our lives today. Let's look at temporal joys versus eternal recompense. We'll go to 2 Peter. All right. 2 Peter chapter 2. Could almost read the whole chapter here, but I don't want to take that much time. I'll just read kind of fast some of it. But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing upon themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their sensuality, and because of them the way of truth will be blasphemed. And in their greed they will exploit you with false words. Their condemnation from long ago is not idle, and their destruction is not asleep. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell, and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment. If he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, for as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment. All right, so you see the picture there, all these examples of the punishment that God brought, and the point of it all is to realize that God is keeping the ungodly for a day of judgment, and he knows how to rescue the godly from our trials. So in light of these outcomes, and in particular here, the outcome that stands out to me is the angels that are cast into hell, right? The outcomes into eternity that should shape the way that we live and think about our lives. Isn't that interesting? The one that's interesting in there to me is Lot, right? Because Lot doesn't come across, if you just read Genesis, he doesn't come across as that good of a character. But we learned something more about him here, that when he lived there in Sodom, his soul was tormented Now I'm thinking, well, why didn't you move out of Sodom? But for what it's worth, we find out that it bothered him, and that's why he was rescued. Do your souls bother you when you look at what's going on in our world today? When you watch, do you just live your life and go, oh, well, to each his own? No. Or you see this stuff and it troubles you and disturbs you inwardly, right? The wickedness that's in our society. I think it should. Let's go to James. James chapter 5.
Just before Peter. It's just before Peter.
All right, James chapter 5, starting at verse 1. If you got the same Bible I'm holding here, you see in the bold, the little, yeah, right. Those are not inspired, by the way, you know that, right? But they are helpful to give kind of little subheadings of what it's about. So this is a warning to the rich. So, okay, good. I can skip over this part. No, you know what? If we were lined up with all the other people in the world that have ever lived in history, we're right up there. The poorest among us, is much wealthier than most people that have ever existed. He says, come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. What kind of treasure have they laid up for the last days? The wrong treasure, right? The things that they have counted on, that they've spent their lives trying to accumulate, and if you would read on, you see that they cheated other people to get this stuff. Who was I talking? Oh, Lena. I was talking to Lena. Oh, see, I'm always telling stories.
That's crazy.
So I get an email from a woman named Marilyn. I don't know her, but I'm figuring she must be someone who lives here in Twin Lakes or somewhere nearby, because she's probably writing to the pastors in town. And she explains, she says, my husband died and I have to move, and I have a baby grand piano that he loved to play, and I can't take it with me. So if you know somebody that could use this piano, I would be glad to give it to them, someone who would treasure it the way my husband did. So I talked to Lena, she's our organist for the Saturday service, and she says, I do know someone who might be interested in a piano. So I give them the contact information, they look into it. Guess what it is? It's a scam.
Oh.
This woman, Marilyn, whoever's sending this, she's not local. When you follow it up, she says, oh, we live in Arkansas. So for this is how much it would cost to ship it. So just send the shipping money and we'll send you the piano. Yeah.
Thank goodness you know.
Yeah. You know, we all sin. We all make mistakes and say and do things we wish we didn't. But isn't that wicked?
Yeah.
Try to take advantage of some other poor person that way intentionally from start to finish. But there are people that do that, right?
And the most vulnerable sometimes.
And-
Yes,
Yeah.
and they prey on the whole stuff. And the older
Yes.
Despicable.
Yes, it is despicable. Well, they have laid up treasure for themselves here, James says. But it's not the kind of treasure they think. In other words, the idea that there is a hell to be rejected, that should shape the way we live our lives today, right? Okay. Let's go to Psalm 73. Psalm 73. My wife is teaching Sunday school, but I wish she was in here, because this should be like her theme psalm. My wife is a good and a godly woman, so it bothers her when she sees bad things happening, and she'll say to me again and again, she'll say, yeah, but nothing's ever gonna be done about it. I heard this, I should be careful because I'm on tape. I heard this yesterday too. I cannot confirm that this is true, but I heard this from someone in the news that I do believe is trustworthy and that I think tells the truth. I just don't know it for a fact. But he was talking about the California governor, Gavin Newsom, that he personally, or his LLC or whatever, he owns like 20 Panera Bread. Yeah, what's the word? Franchises, yeah. And so they just passed this minimum wage thing in California, and you heard about all these businesses that are going out of business because they just can't pay their employees $20 an hour. According to the person that reported this, there's some kind of an exclusion in there so that his Panera Bread stores are not covered by that.
Everybody else would not then.
Yes. Yes.
Sell bread or whatever.
How often do we see stuff like that happen?
All the time.
And so my wife, Dawn, she gets so upset. She says, yeah, but nothing will ever come of it. He'll never get in trouble for it. And I say, honey, we gotta read this sound. Read this sound. Take a look at this. Yeah. And then we'll close. Give ear, O people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from of old, things that we have heard and known that our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, but tell to the coming generation.
We have a different one.
We're in 73.
Psalm
73.
Oh,
I'm reading 78. Thank you. I'm thinking to myself too, when's the good stuff coming? All right, how long would you have let me go on?
I waited until I saw a couple other people look very confused.
Psalm 73, here we go.
16 are starting at 1.
Truly God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet had almost stumbled, my steps had nearly slipped, for I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For they have no pangs until death. Their bodies are fat and sleek. They are not in trouble as others are. They are not stricken like the rest of mankind. Their pride is their necklace. Violence covers them as a garment. Their eyes swell out through fatness. Their hearts overflow with follies. They scoff and speak with malice loftily. They threaten oppression. They set their mouths against the heavens, and their tongue struts through the earth. Therefore his people turn back to them and find no fault in them. And they say, how can God knows? Is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the wicked, always at ease. They increase in riches. All in vain have I kept my heart clean and washed my hands in innocence. For all the day long I have been stricken and rebuked every morning. If I had said, I will speak thus, I would have betrayed the generation of your children. Up to this point, you see what he's saying here? You got these people, it looks like everything goes great for them. They get away with everything. They've got all the wealth, and they get away with stuff, and their bodies are sleek, and everyone thinks they're so wonderful. And I've tried so hard to do right. I've tried to do everything the way I should do it, and instead everything bad seems to happen to me. Now, any other dawns in the crowd here? But look at this, verse 16. But when I thought how to understand this, it seemed to me a wearisome task until I went into the sanctuary of God. Then I discerned their end. Truly you set them in slippery places. You make them fall to ruin. How they are destroyed in a moment, swept away utterly by terrors, like a dream when one awakes. O Lord, when you rouse yourself, you despise them as phantoms. In other words, it looks like everything's going great for them, but the day will come when they'll have to pay. I keep telling Dawn, I said, nobody gets away with anything. Everything will be paid for, either by Jesus or by the person that did it, one or the other. But nothing gets ignored, where God just lets it go. All right, let's stop there. It's 11 o'clock. So I hope you'll join us again next week. And we'll continue on. We're not making very fast progress, are we?
Pastor, 1 Corinthians 3, so that means you can take it with you when you die. I mean, if it's built on the kingdom of God, and then it gets cashed in for rewards.
Usually when you hear that phrase, "take it with you," people think about temporal things, yeah. Like you can't take your car, you can't take your stereo. What can you take? The things, the works you have done that have been faithful and true, wrought by the Spirit working in your life, out of love. Those things accrue. They are part of the books. So there's the book of life, right? It's got the names of all the people who are going down. But there's also the books that record all of what we've done.
He'd always tease us about that.
Those are part of the judgment and
You know it, but that's amazing.
the
He was funny though.
where they receive their degree of reward for it.